Hello friend, you are on the New Tech channel where I review new technologies. Every day I post new interesting videos about new products and events in the world of technology. If you are interested, then subscribe to the channel so as not to lose me. Also write what you are interested in within the framework of my topic and I will try to make a review about it. Random Access Memory, RAM, abbreviations, is a short-term digital storage device. Smartphones, like computers, use RAM primarily to store the data that running applications use. This is because RAM is very fast. Even the fastest hard drive or flash drive is slow compared to RAM. How much RAM is in smartphones? Back in the early years of Android, smartphones had 512 megabytes of memory, and flagships could boast even 1 gigabyte. Thus began a revolution in the world of phones and smartphones. Over time, RAM only got bigger. By 2018, most high-tech smartphones had 3 gigabytes of RAM on board, and in 2018 and 2019, 4 gigabytes became the de facto standard. It would seem, we're even more. But there are more and more phones on sale with 6 gigabytes, 8 gigabytes, even 10 gigabytes and 12 gigabytes of RAM. Surely you have laptops running Windows 10 at home with 4 gigabytes of RAM. The MacBook has 8 gigabytes of RAM and can run demanding applications like Premiere Pro or Photoshop. Do you seriously think that a phone needs more RAM than a laptop? How an Android smartphone uses RAM? To understand whether a smartphone has enough RAM and how much it should have, you need to figure out how it is used. When you start a new application on Android, the Linux kernel creates a new process. A process is a unit of execution with its own virtual address space, which maps to physical memory. The Linux kernel manages the resources needed for this process. This includes processor time, data input and output, and physical memory, RAM. When enough resources are available, the operation of the kernel is simple. If a process requires more CPU time, the kernel can easily give it more execution time and more RAM. However, when resources are limited, things get more complicated. If the processor, CPU, of the smartphone is overloaded, then the kernel waits for the process to complete. And all this time, the allocated RAM is still busy. What if there are many such processes? They can quickly eat up all your RAM. And the phone will become an unresponsive brick. Linux and Android deal with this problem in two ways. The first way is when Android can allocate some of the internal memory, ROM, for the swap file. This is exactly what OSes do on computers. When there is insufficient memory, the oldest and least used parts of RAM are written to the disk. And the RAM they occupy becomes available for other processes. If later this data is required, it is read from disk and written back to RAM. The second way for a smartphone to be fast is to kill old processes. Usually these are those that were launched a long time ago and are not currently used. In fact, all phones necessarily use the first and second methods. More RAM allows you to use the kill less often. That is why manufacturing companies increase the amount of RAM in phones literally every year. What conclusion can be drawn from this information? Smartphone manufacturers are not to blame for the constant growth of RAM. After all, mobile app and game developers are making them more and more heavy and demanding. How much RAM do applications use? Applications are also different. There are built-in, standard, without which the operation of the smartphone is not possible. For example, the phone app. There are games and multimedia programs. Browsers. They all have completely different appetites. Standard applications use from 130 megabytes to 400 megabytes of RAM. There are apps like YouTube and WhatsApp, as well as casual games like Crossy Road and Candy Crush. There are also media applications that load a large number of images and therefore use more RAM to display them. For example, Google Photos and Instagram. These applications use between 400 megabytes and 700 megabytes of RAM. Finally, there are huge applications, mostly high-end 3D games. These monsters gobble up gigabytes of your smartphone's RAM like a hungry Pac-Man. For example, PUBG Mobile can use between 800 megabytes and 1152 megabytes of RAM. The amount of RAM used on the device depends entirely on what applications you have running. If you like Instagram and Candy Crush but nothing else, then you'll be using just over 1 GB of RAM. If you play PUBG and Asphalt 9 all the time, you will need 2 GB just for games. Do not forget that the operating system itself also requires 500 to 1 GB of RAM. Plus background processes that constantly hang in memory. For example, Viber or another messenger. Those. Not all RAM is available to you. 6 GB of RAM in a smartphone is ideal. This amount of RAM means a comfort zone for a smartphone user. Stock apps stay in memory for long periods of time, and multitasking is fast. You won't notice switching between apps and games. Phones with 6 GB of RAM can switch between dozens or more apps, including some super powerful ones. And you won't even notice some apps reloading. Naturally, smartphones with 8 GB of RAM are even better in terms of smooth operation. They can store at least a dozen applications in memory without a reboot. Even big ones like PUBG and Google Photos, switching between applications is seamless. Why do we need smartphones with 8 GB or more RAM? Unlike computers, Android smartphones don't make apps that they can't run. Even with 3 GB of RAM, we are not talking about what applications the smartphone will pull. We only consider how many applications it can store in memory at the same time. Smartphones with 4 GB work well, with 6 GB they work fine, with 8 GB already, probably, too much. 10 GB, 12 GB, 16 GB is just stupid. These are examples of marketing gimmicks that increase the price and provide little or no benefit to the user.